As storytellers, we believe it is imperative for us to study the art of storytelling. Today, we are going to be discussing the obligatory scene in your story. This is a concept that Robert McKee talks about in his book, Story. In it, he says that the obligatory scene is an event the audience knows it must see before the story can end.
I am the Dragon Warrior. Ah. You? Him? He's a panda. You're a panda. What are you gonna do, big guy? Sit on me?
This scene will bring the protagonist into a confrontation with the most powerful forces of antagonism in their quest. But what does this mean for us as writers, though? No matter what type of story you're writing, you will have one of these. Other people call it the crisis, and it's a scene where everything comes to a head in your story. For a romance, it's the final declaration and acceptance of love. In an action story, it's the final showdown between the hero and the villain. And in a drama, it's usually the final decision that the protagonist has to make to become the new person they need to be.
You have bewitched me, body and soul, and I love you. I never wish to be parted from you from this day on.
Now, when we talk about this scene, it is something that is inherent in storytelling. Especially in our time in history, we have to give the audience respect. Since the world has mostly become literate, audiences have become more aware of the elements of storytelling. So they know by now that the rom-com will ultimately come down to the final declaration of love from the initially unreceptive individual. This is something that can feel like a formulaic idea, but it's liberating because it means that you don't have to worry about what happens at that point in the story.
So that is his name. Poe. Finally, a worthy opponent. Our battle will be legendary.
We use our first act to set up our story, and specifically the inciting incident is the element that directly sets up the obligatory scene. But why does McKee call this an obligatory scene? It's because the audience, no matter the medium, is putting their trust in us, the writers. And it's our job to earn that trust. And we do that by giving them the obligatory scene at our story's climax. In our first acts, we are teasing the audience as to the events that are to come. We want them to feel like they know what's coming, and yet they can't leave the theater saying that was cliche. This obligatory scene is something that works only when we properly set up the scene with our inciting incident, and then constantly remind them of this inevitable scene throughout the telling of the story. By having these signposts that point to the obligatory scene, we are able to keep our audience understanding what's going on. Your audience isn't going to hate you for subtly giving them these hints.
Caesar. Weak. Cobra. Weaker.
Your obligatory scene is one that you have to be careful not to be cliche. However, this doesn't mean that you can just skip the scene or do the opposite of the cliche thing to not be cliche. Your audience didn't come to your superhero movie to see the superhero and the villain talk it out. It is one of the struggles we have as modern writers with such well-read audiences. We will always struggle with cliche. However, we are nothing if not persistent. So be sure to use that knowledge from the audience to give them what they don't know they wanted all along. Your obligatory scene is one that you have to be careful not to be cliche. However, this doesn't mean that you can just skip the scene or do the opposite of the cliche thing to not be cliche. Your audience didn't come to your superhero movie to see the superhero and the villain talk it out. It is one of the struggles we have as modern writers with such well-read audiences. We will always struggle with cliche. However, we are nothing if not persistent. So be sure to use that knowledge from the audience to give them what they don't know they wanted all along.